Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, welcome
Hi.
everyone for the first day of mapping fragments.
Welcome. I'm just trying to switch off my video so that it's clear. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
your video is off.
No
My video is off.
videos.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
So the first question that we are across the three sessions of mapping fragments, what we'll be doing is relating the fragmentation of the self to the fragmentation of locality in a sense, the fragmentation of a sense of place.
Okay.
So the
Yeah.
first question towards that is how do we get fragmented?
We means self or the self in the place?
So the self and the
Both.
place we are considering we are going across traversing the two terms in a in a parallel way.
Okay.
So sometimes we are deliberately not specifying in which context we mean the to apply the word.
Mm-hmm.
So because it can be applied in both.
And I think we can discuss both or either or whichever way we'd like to take the discussion.
Okay.
Like
So
what does it feel like to us at this group at the moment? What is being fragmented?
yeah, I think we could just we could get closer to the issue at hand once we can talk about it more openly.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we get fragmented? What do we feel about getting fragmented? About being fragmented?
The first thing that comes to me um, in a generic way is when you think of, say, community or a group of people and how the group itself is made of different, they can be get seen as fragments. So if you start backwards and think of a set of people as a unit, then you will have to then fragment the unit to look at what it's made up of. I mean, it can be even the way we look at anything in the way matter is divided into molecules and so forth. The other thing that occurs to me in a kind of instinctive way is to think of the self and how there are many parts of the self that one is constantly trying to deal with or confront and embrace everything at the same time.
So what is that? What does that make you feel in the immediacy of when you feel fragmented? In that moment, do you feel like enjoying the fragmentation, or do you feel like something? You feel like resisting that moment?
I think it's neither. What is most important for me is to recognize. It's for me to recognize the fragmentation is far more important than either resisting or enjoying it.
But the
But
question then is, do we know that the fragmentation is happening, or it's something that you only perceive it is in retrospect? That's the important question, because to be able to perceive something as fragments is also the ability to be able to look at different points of reference simultaneously. Uh, yeah, and the crucial question then I would ask, because then fundamentally we are always trying to put fragments together in the speculation of producing a whole or making sense and so on, whether it's the fragmentation of the speech to be able to bring into a structure, whether it's fragmentation of fragmented experiences trying to pull together to make sense of a new place. Because it's only the confrontation or the experience of a new thing that will guide you to be able to pull together fragments to make sense of things that is at hand. So that is
Yeah.
one of the things that I can think of in conversation to what you were saying.
So you mean to say the a specific moment when the fragmentation occurs is what we should zoom into, as
No,
in why?
I mean to say that the a moment of an experience
Yeah,
is itself is not fragmented necessarily,
yeah.
but somewhere it tries to bring together a set of fragments of our experiential realm into in trying to make sense of what you just see or what you just heard.
Right, but it's not clear to me whether you're pointing us towards the. I mean, should we look into the actual performance of fragmentation, or should we look at the post of that event, the moment the
Well,
event
you can
after
do
it has already occurred?
no, you can actually do because even when the experience occurs, it's I think both fold. Even if you think about the post of what think about fragmentation as a structure, the idea of experiencing anything in a fragmented way, not necessarily in any way, but the idea of only finding some points of reference through which you can make sense of a space, which doesn't mean that you're already bringing things from the past necessarily. This might just be the a conversation that we were having in terms of pulling fragments together to be able to articulate maybe another set of fragmentation process, which may or may not occur into a whole. There is no necessity or a compulsion.
So you wouldn't necessarily hold a fragment as a binary opposite of an integrated whole.
No.
That makes sense because how do we know which fragment belongs to the whole? Like, how do I know if I have a bunch of pieces? I don't know what the whole is necessarily. And then how
So
would I know that
fragment in
something
itself can be.
belongs to?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, what I'm saying is, if I have a bunch of jumbled jigsaw pieces, I don't know, and I don't have a picture of the final picture, what the whole thing is, like what the map is, then I don't know really if this piece even belongs to the whole or if it's just a fragment lying around, like an impurity.
Yeah, we might not know the whole, but
So, but I
No,
think
like the
perception
point is,
whole and
where do
perception
I,
of the fragment.
yeah, I'll
sorry,
tell you.
I guess the point is like, we only have the fragments.
Yeah,
We don't know what the whole is like, necessarily.
we
So, are you
might
saying
not.
all
Yeah.
experience are fragmented?
I would think so, yes. I mean, we ourselves try to make a picture, for example.
Okay.
And
But
first, I need to have an awareness, first of all, that this fragment exists. And then I have to connect it with something else. And then eventually, after collecting many fragments, maybe some experience emerges eventually in hindsight.
Which is may or may not possible, is what you're saying. It's like unpredictable in a way.
Yeah, something like that.
But fragmentation is that way a process that we almost engage on an everyday basis.
True, that, yes, I do agree with that, yeah.
the what I would like to
There's
counter
also
that
this
with,
tendency. Well, there's also this tendency to um, a group. You know, if you look at the way basic animal tendencies are, that there is a territorial and grouping tendency. So there will be a herd, there will be a group of animals that will always try to get to as humans, so we cannot resist
Mm.
tendency to build a community either. And within that, there is the recognition of the different fragments that are trying to coexist. So,
Are you saying that the journey is towards the
I
whole?
don't think we can quite. Yeah.
Are you saying that the journey is towards the whole, and what we are trying to do in that process is basically trying to make sense of the fragments that we gather and trying to construct a structure that gives us more sense of thinking about the world? Is that what you're saying?
Perhaps, and also this whole is not very definite because the
Yeah, I mean,
holes are
I'm
keeping
saying
on changing.
what I would like to ask at this point is, even if the whole is not known or is
Hmm.
not clear in some way,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Maybe it does.
Yeah, so I think the ambiguity of the whole is not it does not produce a necessary set of circumstances
Hmm.
to kind of negate the whole.
No, we don't know that. We don't know that.
Yeah,
The fact that I have a few pieces of a bangle doesn't mean that the complete bangle didn't exist.
right.
I don't know what it is part of. That's what I'm saying.
But it's also the whole is also, for example, something like the subject, no? Like as if there is always the subject is trying to reach its a point of becoming a whole subject, but it's always in the context of becoming, which is something like the whole as well, because not the compulsion, the journey is always towards heading towards a whole, but you're not necessarily sure whether when you are at the whole you recognize that you're
Yeah,
actually part of the whole. No,
very
that
true. Yeah,
benefit of doubt,
yeah,
which in retrospect you might think that maybe I was there, I did not realize at that moment.
yeah. And then it
So
broke up
that,
again, and
yeah.
yeah.
But why are we, which are all the reasons why we are concerned about the whole? For one that is obvious to me is that in fragmentation, one is in a way feeling a dissipation of the entire corpus of energy.
Mm-hmm.
So in a fragment, one would feel that there is not as much, or yeah, as much resonance. There's not as much energy as the whole might have, and that's the only reason why we are even calling it a fragment and not a whole.
But it might also be a necessary methodology to
And
be
maybe
able to.
that is why there is the tendency to try to unify or to connect or group. Because of the dissipation of this energy, you feel, you know that there's something missing, then you want to get more of it.
As well as you said earlier, Malvika, this inherent desire, not desire, but inherent physical push towards collection. Like you talked about herds, right?
Yeah,
There is some
yeah,
kind of a
yeah,
tendency for things to come together for some reason. Something is pulling them
yeah,
together, and we
yeah.
don't necessarily know what.
I think I'd like to add something interesting to the mix because I hope I'm being heard clearly.
Yeah, we can
Yes.
hear
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, because I mean this whole idea of the coherent whole of the experience. I think there's also there's a beauty in sort of recognizing these fragments because piecing, I mean, understanding this fragmentation can allow to us being articulating a different story and sort of shifting the whole or creating a new coherent whole. And I think that's what we try to do in a lot of the different practices that we are in. So this idea of fragmentation and making it whole actually is very relevant, and it's actually critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the reality of the situation is that we are fragmented and we might never be whole. And
That's true. Yeah.
yeah, so we might as well form a relationship with our fragments and develop a sense of coherence around being fragmented rather than lie in wait till the moment we are in, really complete in that sense.
Yeah, because we don't even know if we can be, or if it is even a possibility or a probability even, because there's too many pieces.
But isn't it also the sense of our time that we would like to be participants of the fragmentation rather than or the visionaries of the whole?
Yeah, true. It's a sign of our times, yes.
Yeah, it's
Distraction.
distraction and also the idea of compartmentalizing, which of course product of a lot of forces around, which I'm not saying necessarily is a negative formation, but something that is a like a quality of our present which thinks of fragmentation as more productive exercise rather than a whole, which is like something I would say something like the modern time was trying to go towards this experiential realm, which is like kind of a whole experience, no?
Yeah,
Maybe.
but the real problem that occurs is along with the fragmentation of the self, when our desire itself is fragmented.
Yeah.
That is the problem, because then we are conflicted, and we are conflicted in a way that we are actually working at cross purposes with our own, with the satisfaction of our own desire in that sense, because
But the thing is, should desire, what's wrong with, we don't know if desire should be a whole or if it's supposed to be fragmented. Maybe we are like Aditya just said, maybe we are in a new place now where we have to embrace the fragmentation. Maybe desire is meant to be fragmented.
It's same in the context of the place, because the whole of, for example, even if you talk in pure political terms, the whole of the nation is always imagined, whereas always the regions which are fragments try to articulate themselves as a whole, which in reality never happens because they're just so diverse.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right,
it's a
and the identity sometimes goes beyond the definition of what the nation is.
and some relate to the whole, at least pretend to relate to the whole men other than the others, so there's always this inherent
There's a
inconsistent
tension.
tension
Yeah.
within the fragments of
Yeah.
whether we are participating in the whole in the same way, which is the typical
Yeah.
example of it is India in a way, no?
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So in the parallel text chat, there is a kind of attempt to map what we mean by the whole. So
Yeah.
how would you like to consider that? So before we move on to the next question, which is in a way related to being whole in the sense of being together. Before that, how would we consider, what does that mean to be whole?
Is that the second question?
Yeah, so
No, so
yeah,
part of the
if we
first
just
question.
consider it. Yeah.
Because Dawn is saying that whole does not mean necessarily a loss of individuation.
Yeah.
Which is
So do
true.
we agree with that?
Yeah.
But
But
it
is
does
it?
mean
Is
that
it? I mean,
synthesizing of individuation in some form, even though individuation exists.
Yeah, and that's what Nu has said. He says the whole is perhaps our individual fragments quivering simultaneously.
Yeah.
but is it? Is it? I mean, is that whole something just that we just put together for some reason we don't know what? I'm not able to see what a whole is in
Yeah.
an
No,
absolute
and
sense.
that's what I actually said a little while ago on the text chat, that I don't think we should use the word whole, because whole ends up giving this connotation of something being very perfect, or not really perfect, but a completeness, and that it's not in flux. And I think what I would suggest that we refer to it as is more like a group,
Can we
and the
think of it
group
as an
is
event?
fluid. Like there are it grows and uh, shrinks according
Y-
to
Yeah, what did you say,
as
Aditya?
an
Can
event.
we think of
Can
it
we
as
think
a?
of it an event rather than like it's more
Yeah.
like tangential? Can we think of it as event because group
That's
Yeah.
also
yeah,
It
that's
makes more
interesting.
sense because
the
it's like coordinates of that time and place
yeah,
and
Yes,
exactly.
experience.
yes,
Whereas the event produces the fiction of the whole in a way, no?
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. There's
Whereas,
that.
whereas the whole is always a fiction that needs to be regenerated all the time. But in fact,
Yeah.
what it is just the event where all these fragments come together.
That's
So
right.
Yeah,
the
It's
which
like
event is the entirety of all the fragments.
yeah, exactly.
at that given moment.
Yeah, it might dissipate immediately. Also, there is no necessary
Yeah.
duration to what is being
No,
produced.
and I think the duration is the duration of awareness of it.
Yeah, exactly. Which might happen immediately and like maybe 10 years later. That benefit of doubt always exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So maybe event
if
is one of the ways of thinking about it than actually the whole, as we were discussing.
That makes sense actually.
so the second question is actually is exactly that. So what is being together? Where, how does the idea of coming together arise? And if we take your event thread,
Mm-hmm.
which was here, so what is the event of being together? We can just restate the questions. And
Mm-hmm.
how does the event? How would you restate that question? How does the idea of coming together arise? How would you restate that?
Mm,
I
How
would
does the
personally
event of
tie
coming
it to,
together
I would
arise?
personally tie it to awareness. Like first of all, you have to be aware that you're fragmented. Then you have to be aware of having a desire of coming together. If none of that is there, then there is nothing. I mean, there is no fragment, there is no whole, there is no desire.
yeah. But it's also that's what going back to what I was saying. It's also the context in which we are in, where we think that there is no there monographic or like the singular way of approaching a problem or a question, where it's supposed to be almost like a discursive compulsion to be able to produce these fragments so that event can unfold. Okay, the interest in the unpredictability of the outcome rather than the predictability is something very important in terms of discussion today, which for many institutional structures the predictability is the goal that they would like to achieve. You would like to know what the outcome is, whereas
Right.
the this fragmented unfolding of an event is more about the unpredictability of what just the coming together can produce. And that's something interesting to think about, no? Unpredictability as a form.
That's true because a lot of calcification happens because of this desire to have the structure
Yeah.
in which you end up negating things and negating variables that need to be taken into consideration and perspectives that should be in there, but they don't find a place because somebody has built the structure because they need a sort of stability to be able to extrapolate into the future in order to plan or whatever it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that.
but if we don't look at the situation as a subject,
Mhm.
if we don't look at the situation as someone who is being negated or who is not being acknowledged,
Included. Hmm.
yeah,
Mhm.
if one looks at the at it from the perspective of the event, actually, like Aditya suggested to us, as something which is happening on the external side
Mhm.
of uh, of being the subject. So not this side, not we're not feeling the emotion of being excluded, but we are feeling we are actually feeling the entire experience. So, what is lost? What is lost in the lack of acknowledgement, and what is lost in the no? So, I mean, I'm not trying to say that denying a lack of acknowledgement is fine, but I'm saying that the pain felt and the distress realized is only on one side in that process.
Not necessarily, because if you have fragments that want to be part of a structure, they
Hmm.
are finding distress. The
Yeah.
structure not having the benefit of those fragments being part of it
Yeah.
is not seeing it right away, but eventually it will see the problem of not having those fragments in it.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's also the idea of the fact that the when I go back to unpredictability, the unpredictability is actually not to valorize the uh, lack of having a structure. It is just having a structure that is not looking towards a definitive goal. At the same time, not saying that I am the valorizing of the now, and whatever is predictable is bad. It's just that it is not the question that I would like to engage with, because I would like to succumb to a different kind of purpose, which is, I would like to go back to say that it's the purpose of our time, where that necessity is somewhere made into like the most important uh, method of engaging with each other, which are fragments, even if you talk about us as subjects, us as fragments.
But I think the subject and the event are two opposing perspectives. Actually, they're looking at the fragment from two opposing perspectives.
How is that?
Because the subject is experiencing the fragmentation, and in the event we discussed that all the fragments at that moment are unifying into rendering the experience. So,
but I don't think events necessarily produce subjects. They produce a perception of a subject. Okay. So
yeah.
subject, I would say, I would argue, of course, borrowing from Deleuze, that there is always the act of becoming, and then there will be a moment where there is perhaps a perception that there is a whole of a subject that's produced, or subjectivity has achieved its synthesis, or etc., etc. But in fact, it is only the fiction that's created by the event.
Yeah, true, because what is the subject even? Is the subject whole? I mean, the subject is only part of the subject that's part of the event.
I'm looking at the event as the subject.
I was looking at the fragments as subjects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Malvik, how are you looking at the event as a subject?
Because that is the coming together, and that is what is defining what is the fragment and what is coming together.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought that the subject is the experiencer.
Yeah. So it's the subject is aware of, in that sense, the emotion of the moment.
Yeah, that's how I was looking at it. And then also, and that too, the subject is only that part of the experiencer which is perceiving whatever it is. So it's only a section of me that is perceiving something. You know, like if I'm in a dangerous situation, it's my lizard brain that's perceiving the situation. My frontal lobes are not there at the moment. So I'm only, part of me is present, not the entirety of me. So there's fragmentation at every level.
New Paradox offers on chat, subjects are coordinates and the event is the mapping process.
Okay. Subjects are some
Are
of
coordinates.
Right. Subjects are part of a group of coordinates. I would agree that the event is a mapping process. Yes, I would agree with that.
Wouldn't it be the opposite? Wouldn't the event hold like unlimited potential and possibilities? And isn't the subject a lens that we're using to map our experience of that event?
Either ways, yeah. I see that as an intersection actually, this between the subject and the event. It's that cross section.
But isn't the event the context for the subject to become?
But even for the event made sense of, that part of the subject has to be there.
Okay.
Well, even when we're talking about the event causing extreme fear, which causes you to access the lizard brain aspect of the subject, the same event could be like interpreted differently if you had access to another part of the subject. So it could lead to new forms of thought or new experience altogether based on the subject. So I don't think the event per se can be distilled into like one emotion or one meaning.
Yeah. It's not a structure, so. Definitive structure.
So the event is fragmented as well, is it?
It's like, how is the event externally happening?
I think it
what
depends
part of
on
me
what
is perceiving it.
You're looking at it from, and I think this idea of what is the subject and what is the, I think what is clear in our discussion is that we have some idea of what the fragments are, and we have some idea of what an event is. But whether what the subject is a little, I'm still finding it a little vague because anything can become the subject. It depends on where you're looking at it from.
Right. So depending on whose perspective it is.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. Like, it depends on who's perceiving and what part of me is perceiving. There is even that. Because there is within me fragmentation of within the cell. It already depends on which part of the cell is activated at a moment.
It's also to do with the event is caused by the fragments. So one is feeding the other, and the event is also feeding the fragments.
It's
So how do you say that the event is caused by the fragments?
Because the fragments are coming together, and that becomes an event.
It's if like some part of the fragment is activated in one context, but another, it depends on, it's like two people feeding into an argument.
Yeah.
The event of the argument would not have happened if one person had backed off.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very true.
But what comes out of the event, then the third layer that comes out of the event, or whatever, the different unfolding that happens through the very act of event, doesn't necessarily condition the subjects that fragments try to project? Or do you think that there's a transformative moment of them becoming something else?
I feel it's a constant transformation. I feel it's like a feedback loop that's constantly feeding into itself, and it really depends on the previous moment.
Yeah. It's also rearranging, constant rearranging, as you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
But how would we be able to consider the fragmentation of the event? Because I'm still confounded with that. Because a while ago we were talking about the event as a map of the fragments.
Yeah.
And then if we are also considering the fragmented event, that means the map is never complete.
The map is never complete. I don't think a map is a completion of anything at all.
Yeah.
But map has precisions in between. For example, when the fragments become an event, there is a common cause through which these fragments want to interact with each other.
Yeah.
And at the same time go onto their fragmented path. Sometimes they're crooked, sometimes they can be a different fragmented path then on.
Yeah.
But then the event is the moment of the interruption of some kind. And I'm not meaning interruption in a negative way here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which will let the fragments to a different journey. It's not necessarily trying to pull on all the fragments together. That way the event is just bringing together the fragments as much as it's fragmenting the fragments again into a different level.
The map is a perspective, and that's why I think you can have many maps. And what the event does is create these many maps, and the many maps can have different combination of fragments in each one.
Does the map does each event create space for multiple maps, and
it's a map that doesn't have a cartography as its fundamental base. It's a map that has much more multivocal structural ways of engaging with it. It's a map that is imaginary in a way. It's just like maybe set of colors like lines and routes and zigzag puzzles, etc.
In some ways you're creating patterns.
Yeah, it's pattern. It's a pattern that has some density.
Yeah, so like Don is suggesting on chat that each bird signals to its nearby fellows. The whole is a movement chained across many feedback loops.
Yeah.
I think it's a very good analogy, the murmuration, because that's actually what exactly how you would represent it in a given moment from one cross section. It's not three-dimensional. I mean, it's not multi-dimensional, but the murmuration is a representation of one cross section of an event and the perspective of it in that moment.
Yeah.
But does using the word perspective already imagine an individual in that sense? Because do perspectives belong only to individuals?
No, they don't. Perspectives are independent of anything. Perspectives can belong to individuals, but they are bigger than that. They can be perspectives without
You
individuals.
can also, yeah, and you can also have a collective perspective where a perspective might be shared or parts of a perspective might be
A
shared.
conglomeration of perspectives, yeah.
So then, no, I was just trying to relate the idea, the perspective idea to the map. And when Malvika said that
Okay.
maps are perspectives, and
Hmm.
perspectives are in that sense collectives, can be
Hmm.
collectives, then
Hmm.
maps are collectives of fragments as well, right? So in
Yes,
this sense,
yes, yes.
maps are never complete. That might be true, but
Hmm.
then they hold within themselves the potential to be complete, right?
Yes,
Momentarily.
fiction. Fiction to be complete.
I think the map cannot be complete at any point. I mean, it is a reduction,
Yeah.
which
Hmm.
by essence it's a reduction. A map is a reduction, and that's how. So it is reality reduced into a form that can be acted upon and can bring people and fragments together.
Hmm.
So
In fact,
Ajay,
a map.
how
Go
would
ahead.
you how are you calling a map a reduction? Would you like to expand on that?
Um, again, going back to the idea of the event, and I think what we're talking about is the sort of a tension between reality and language, the structure of our experience, and that structure is essentially a reduction of all the possibilities that exist in reality, that the unknowable reality, right? And so in that sense, a map is a tool. It's sort of, it probably relaxes the the tension caused in interfacing with this reality,
Hmm.
but necessarily has to be fragmented again, otherwise I think the individual dissolves into that map.
It's a way of avoiding disorientation of a bigger kind, in a way. And also to, in some ways, of course, historically, to exercise control
Yeah.
Hmm.
or pretend to exercise control, that I can have the ability to be able to exercise control
Yeah.
just because I can have this method of the map or mapping.
But the map now, now just turning towards the third question, which is where do fragments unite? So, where maps come together is territory, the idea of territory.
Hmm.
So, and if maps are, I mean, going by what you are saying, if and if we add maps as territory to the mix, then where do we go? Where do we arrive?
I think maps are metastable states, and sometimes these states last for a while. So if you have a map that is territorial, at a given moment for a certain number of centuries, a certain map, for example, to be very concrete, is in vogue, and then something changes, then that map is redrawn. So a map also has a duration if we look at it from a geographical perspective in terms of not a land map or even land maps. I mean, the kind of maps that we use as in our day-to-day, you know, concreteness. So I feel it's like a metastable state.
No, but I am interested, let's say, for some time in talking about how the idea of maps, when applied to the self, was
Hmm.
such a porous entity. But the same map, when we apply it to space, it becomes a very fixed reality in the form of territory. So
Because
how
again,
Not
does
necessarily. No, 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 no. I think it works in a very similar way. The whole idea of identity and self is in some ways this mapping. And when you look at the negative, I think what maps also do is to create the negative space, and we are perhaps accustomed to look at what is being defined in the positive space as what we are mapping, and what we are mapping either as a self identity or a nationhood or whatever, but we're not focusing so much on the negative space of what we are not mapping.
Hmm.
I
And
I'm sorry, I actually don't see a difference between this mapping the self and mapping territories. Both are metastable states. We have
Yeah.
figured out that
Yes, I
it's
agree.
a coming together, and it
What-
stays for a while. Then some new information comes in, it changes things up again.
And it's also, as Malvika saying, it's a question of what you would like to map and what you would not. No,
Yeah.
it's also the question of the what do you say, the precision of what you would like to project as what a place is and what you would like to hide as what the place is not or is.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's that's where
But also our idea of how, yeah, and how we're relating to what we think is the other, and we invariably end up identifying with the other because there are parts of ourselves in the other.
Yeah, and when we project ourselves, we are projecting those parts that we want to be shown, which we think we need to be shown, and that's in relation to the other.
Actually, projection is then a good idea because both within the self, with the self and with the territory, it's always a projection.
Yeah.
It's a projection of what you would like to think of an event, or an event should be. It's basically a projection of an event for a set of fragments, or it's a projection of a self and a projection of course, be territory, or what you would like to perceive within the territory and what you would like to not.
Yeah, it's like where are the lines drawn,
Yeah.
and that depends on what we want to project.
And perception is quite passive as in relation to for something like projection, because projection is more like an informed act that you're, maybe we should not call it so loosely, but politically aware that what you are trying to achieve.
Projection does come from a sort of deliberateness, but the ultimate image that emerges may be out of the projector's control.
Yeah.
Because if they are projecting a candle, but then it's bright sunlight, it's not seen.
Yeah. Even there, the unpredictable. So it's not necessarily that we can only project, but we cannot control the outcome of the projection, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, like I might say ki this is the boundary of my colony or something, but the municipality may have decided something else altogether. So
Yeah.
they'll draw it something.
So we cannot control the projection, the outcome of the projection, but in the currentness of the moment,
Okay.
our projection, whatever it may be, is taken as reality.
Reality.
Yeah, it's taken as a function of reality, as in this is the way things are.
Yeah.
If it serves our purpose, maybe. If we want to have a semblance of reality, and if that is of importance, then maybe, yeah.
But that's again related to a goal of what we want out of the projection.
Yeah.
So, but so are you saying that projections are conscious?
Projections are conscious to a certain extent, but the eventual image that happens, it may not be in the control of the projector.
Because that depends on experience, on the actual reception.
Yeah. So projections that way are the way in which you would like to channelize your perceptions of what you would like to revisit and project something onto it, and what you would like to sideline and not engage with. So there is a perception of maybe 150 things, but you would like to only look at 5 things and project a kind of an idea of engaging with. It's a place, it's a person, it's a context, anything.
Right. So it's actually like a narrative.
It's
that
a narrative.
suits your purpose. Yeah.
So if we look at our current question, which is trying to figure where do fragments unite. So how is that related to this projection thread?
I suppose fragments can be consciously brought together. Sorry, fragments are consciously brought together as projections.
Dawn's just added something in the chat window saying projection is equal to hope, desire, which work as organizing principles for things perceived, things being engaged, etc.
Yeah.
True.
But I
So
don't
in that
Organizing
sense, when he
principles
says,
is the thing.
yeah, organizing principles is again relating to something where things come together.
Yeah.
Okay, I forgot what I was saying.
I'm sorry.
No problem. See. No, I was just thinking that where does the projection happen? Is the event the moment where the projection is happening? Does where the fragments, not necessarily in the singular way, try to project onto something?
So the event is one place where a projection is happening, but there is also a map that exists within the desire to project. So there is a desire to project a certain way of appearing, and that's the
Yes.
map.
Yes.
There is a map within the event, but
Hmm.
yet that map is only a narrative.
Yeah. Which does not have the control of what the map would be after the event is over.
Yeah,
But
correct.
how does this happen? That the projection is thought to be as a conscious construction. In that sense, it's a conscious construction partly, and the event is an entirely unconscious rendering. So, how does the projection, in that sense, lend itself to become an event? And I mean,
No,
how
it's
does
not
it
it's not
transform?
an unconscious at all. I think the event is actually when fragments, the perceptions of the fragments get real in terms of get um, like conscious in a way, because it's only in
But
the context.
the event is more than the sum of the projections happening,
Yes, certainly,
right?
but it is certainly what I'm trying to say is that for a perception to translate into something like a projection, even though so there are two levels of it. One is that you yourself looking at something and projecting onto something, uh, and second layer is that you trying to have a conversation with a set of other projections, uh, and maybe contradicting, maybe simultaneously, like like overlapping with what you're saying or similar, etc., etc. Which is to say that whether the not conscious part of the event that you're trying to speak about, I am not very sure whether it's like extremely conscious or extremely not conscious. It's a very tricky thing to say because I don't think it's not non-conscious, because it is something that is being
But
unfolded with awareness.
there is a component of the event that is not rendered by us.
That's the outcome.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So where does that, in that sense, come from?
I think it comes from the cumulative projections. I mean, when all
Yeah.
these projections are coming together, you don't know what the
Friction.
outcome's going to be when things get mixed.
Yeah, it's the friction that exists in the context of the events, and I'm not saying friction necessarily produces a different way of judging their own projections and judging the event itself. Like what are the routes that these projections will take just because they are complemented, they're contested, they're contradict, whatever the kind of the ways in which they're engaged in the context of their event, and what would be the reconfiguring forms of projections that will then on just because they have just experienced the event.
I'm also wondering whether these projections are habitual and where, except for the time when you're conscious of what you want it to do. So at other times, is it some sort of a habitual pattern at work?
Like a compulsion. And you're not even, it's just part of your nature or something.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think Don has an interesting point to make. I think, I mean, in his last comment where he was talking about hope, desire
Yeah.
as organizing principles, I feel, yeah, when we think of, what is the purpose of these projections, at some level, at least one set of emotions and drives, internal drives, sort of requires resonance with our experience of the event, and that seems that's also a sort of a driving force to achieve this coherence. and this whole, the sense of the whole within the event. The sort of the sense of actually seeing the map or the internal projection played out in the event itself. Although I'm sure there are also other conflicting emotions which work which go more towards the the idea of the fragment, and which which sort of
But yeah,
drive.
whichever is the dominant fragment at that moment of the self.
So it seems to be hinged on this projection of hope and desire, or where hope and desire is not really overt. It's an inherent thing, and depending on how the projection works, it's either things come together or they get fragmented.
And also hope and desire might drive the creation of that, drives the creation projection. So the hope leads, the hope for something makes you plan for something, makes you strategize for something.
And it's also actually, I think, too necessary perhaps to also think that fragmentation as a condition rather than fragmentation as a state that you would like to head towards or exist in.
Why would he say that?
Sorry. I'm saying that fragmentation as a condition, it is not, I don't think it's like pre-existing, like it is the way of being, working as fragments. But fragmentation is also a condition where you are aware that you are actually existing in this condition. Whereas not necessarily always the drive is towards being a fragment in a way, It's not, what I'm trying to say is that it's not valorizing the fragment. So somewhere we'll have to think about whether we are presupposing a fragment too much, but or looking at fragmentation as a condition that has its own set of internal consequences.
Yeah, because if we do that, it would be looking at fragments in an entirely contrarian way from how a fragment is otherwise looked at. A fragment is otherwise looked at as a discontinuity of a kind of expanse of energy, or it's looked at as an island of energy in that sense.
Yeah.
And it's not looked at as a sustainable way of being.
So I feel like fragments are what you are aware of. Like there is a continuity, but the things that you become aware of are the fragments.
It's like joining the dots, you mean?
You talked about a condition, right? It's like you said fragments are a condition. Is that what you said? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like fragments are not a condition, but being aware of fragments, like it's like when the quantum physics things, right? Like a particle gets manifested if it is observed. Something, I mean, I'm not, I don't have any authority on it, but I'm just sort of quoting. But it's like the reality only exists when you are aware of it.
No, actually, that makes sense. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that makes sense, that one is that being in a fragmenting state, two is being aware of the fragments. One is that you are in, not always when you're in it, you are aware about it. There will be a moment where you will be aware about these states, which are not necessarily your present, it might be your past.
I'm just wondering if the fragmentation is a condition or wholeness is the condition. I feel like there is a continuum, and the moment of awareness is when a fragment becomes
The moment of awareness is when a fragment becomes a part of the map.
The moment of awareness is when a fragment gets manifested.
So it becomes a part of the map in that sense. It becomes a part of the event. The map is the event.
I think it's two-staged. I mean, there is awareness, and then there has to be a conscious effort to bring it into the map. Otherwise, it's experienced and it's lost instantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like the moment of recognition and the idea that this recognition is going to change the way I'm going to look at the map, or trying to make that effort, as he's saying, to make it reconstruct into something, into the map of thinking that you otherwise have.
Dawn's just brought up another question. How about the anticipation of projection? That is, when one person can adopt, anticipate the point of view projection of another, or to relate to news notes above and current conversation about awareness, the sharing of a map. So, can you anticipate the projection?
And yes, I think we have maps which are anticipations. We hope for something, we desire something, we anticipate something, so we make a map for it, we extrapolate somehow from the past or whatever it is. And that drives into something which I forgot what I was saying.
But is the anticipation again a manifestation of the scope or desire?
Yes,
Certainly.
yes.
It's the anticipation is the way you would like to channel your desires of looking at a place, for instance.
Right. Yeah.
The anticipation is the process through which you would like to make sense of the place through map, in a way.
Yeah, which like
And
you were
would
saying,
that apply
mapping.
to the self as well? Like,
Yeah.
do you?
Yeah, certainly, because it's always an anticipation of what the real self is, and the process of achieving or going closer to that real self, or trying to address or articulate to that real self, is the constant kind of question that you're internally trying to raise. And so, in the context of the place, whether the experience of the place is what I am anticipating it to be, or
So, in that moment of anticipation, is there some sort of a compilation of the fragments, and that is going into the projection? Or
Yeah.
I'm trying
certainly.
to think of the mechanism.
Certainly, because I think the anticipation is a composition produced with the different fragments that we have accumulated. That's certainly the possibility of we can think about it that way. Maybe some fragments are coming together to produce this anticipation about something, whether it's the self or whether it's the place.
Right.
So you were saying mapping forms fragments. So I can relate to that, because if we are drawing a map, we have to name parts of it just by the mechanism of drawing the map. And so we have to give identities to pieces.
So mapping is the process of fragmentation then.
Yes.
So it is not the process of unification.
I think it is both.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah.
So the map
Simultaneous, we can say.
Mapping creates patterns. So whether it's a patterns of the fragments or the commonalities within amongst the fragments that you're trying to trace and put together, it depends on how you're looking at it. And which is why I think of mapping as something that does both positive and negative things. When you bring things together, you're also dividing things. You're leaving out something else.
Yeah.
So considering that, yeah, we are in the last minute, and tomorrow we are actually going to be looking at the precursor to maps. Actually, we're going to be talking more about patterns tomorrow. So we'll share the link with you for tomorrow's discussion in a bit in the text chat here.
Okay.
But I guess it's a good point to conclude for today, and then to reassemble tomorrow and focus more on the pattern.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the Hangout link.
Yeah.
Can everyone
This is
see
the
it?
link for tomorrow, and if you click that, then you'll be in the discussion here as today. Yeah. So I hope as many of you can join in tomorrow as well. Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks everyone. Very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.